The desert sun was already blazing at 8:30 a.m. as Jessica Rodriguez pushed her 18-month-old daughter Emma through the cracked sidewalks of Phoenix's abandoned industrial district. This wasn't the scenic route most mothers would choose for their morning walks, but it was the quickest path to Dr. Martinez's pediatric clinic, and Jessica had learned to navigate around the potholes and broken glass that littered the forgotten corner of the city. Emma had always been what pediatricians called a remarkably calm baby. Unlike other toddlers who threw tantrums or cried at every minor inconvenience, Emma possessed an almost eerie tranquility that sometimes worried Jessica. She rarely fussed, seldom demanded attention, and seemed content to observe the world through her large, dark eyes that seemed to hold wisdom far beyond her tender age. Her grandmother often joked that Emma was an old soul trapped in a baby's body. The industrial district told the story of Phoenix's forgotten dreams. Massive concrete structures stood like silent monuments to a more prosperous time, when this area buzzed with activity and employed hundreds of local residents. Now, weeds pushed through sidewalk cracks, and graffiti artists had claimed the walls as their canvas. Most people avoided this route, but Jessica had grown comfortable with the shortcut that saved her 15 minutes on their weekly clinic visits. As they approached the cluster of storage tanks that dominated the landscape, Emma suddenly stiffened in her stroller. Her tiny hands gripped the safety bar, and she began making soft whimpering sounds, something Jessica had never heard from her unusually quiet daughter. At first, Jessica attributed it to the heat or perhaps hunger, but Emma's sounds grew more urgent and distressed. "What's wrong, mi amor?" Jessica cooed, stopping to check Emma's diaper and offer her sippy cup. But Emma pushed the cup away and began pointing frantically toward the largest storage tank, a massive cylindrical concrete structure that rose 20 feet into the desert sky like a modernist tower. Her pointing became more insistent, accompanied by sounds that weren't quite crying, but conveyed unmistakable distress. Jessica had never seen her daughter behave this way. Emma's usual calm demeanor had been replaced by an urgency that seemed almost supernatural. The baby's dark eyes were fixed on the storage tank with laser-like intensity, and her pointing finger trembled with determination. It was as if she was trying to communicate something vital, but lacked the words to express it. "Emma, sweetheart, there's nothing there," Jessica said, following her daughter's gaze toward the seemingly empty concrete structure. "It's just an old tank, baby girl." But even as she spoke, Jessica felt a chill despite the rising desert temperature. Something about Emma's behavior triggered her maternal instincts in a way that made her skin prickle with unease. Then she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the ambient noise of distant traffic and rustling desert wind. It was a whimper, barely audible, but unmistakably the sound of an animal in distress. The sound seemed to be coming from inside the concrete cylinder that held Emma's unwavering attention. Jessica's heart began racing as she approached the tank cautiously, leaving Emma secured in her stroller but positioned where she could see her mother. The storage tank had a small opening near its base, probably designed for drainage or maintenance access. Jessica knelt down and peered through the gap, her eyes adjusting to the darkness within. What she saw made her gasp audibly and stumble backward. At the bottom of the tank, nearly 25 feet below ground level, lay a large German shepherd. The dog's golden and black coat was matted with dirt and grime, and his powerful frame looked tragically diminished. His ribs were visible through his fur, and his head rested heavily on the concrete floor. But most heartbreaking were his eyes, intelligent, desperate eyes that looked up toward the opening with a mixture of hope and resignation. The dog was clearly exhausted and dehydrated, probably having been trapped for days without food or water. The smooth concrete walls offered no possibility of escape for even the most athletic animal. He had apparently fallen in, or been thrown in, and was now waiting to die in what had become his concrete tomb. Jessica's mind raced as she processed the situation. This magnificent animal was dying just feet away from a busy pedestrian route, yet Emma was apparently the first to sense his presence. How was it possible that her baby daughter, who couldn't yet form complete sentences, had detected suffering that dozens of adult passers-by had missed? Emma had stopped whimpering now and was watching her mother intently, as if she knew that her message had finally been received and understood. There was something almost serene about the baby's expression now, a look of quiet satisfaction, as if she had completed the first phase of an important mission. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered, looking back and forth between her daughter and the trapped dog. "Emma, how did you know? How did you possibly know he was in there?" The implication sent chills through Jessica's body. Her daughter had somehow sensed the suffering of a trapped animal through 25 feet of concrete and darkness. It defied logical explanation, yet the evidence was undeniable. Emma had guided them to this exact spot and refused to be calm until their mother investigated. As Jessica fumbled for her cell phone to call for help, she realized that this moment would change their lives forever. Her quiet, intuitive daughter had just demonstrated an extraordinary gift for compassion that would soon mobilize an entire community and capture the attention of the world. The rescue was just beginning, but already Jessica knew that Emma was no ordinary child. She was someone special, someone who could hear cries for help that others couldn't detect, someone whose pure heart could bridge the communication gap between species and touch souls in ways that seemed almost magical. Jessica's hands trembled as she dialed 911, her eyes darting between her phone screen and the concrete prison that held the dying German Shepherd. Emma remained unusually still in her stroller, her small fingers wrapped around the safety bar, as she continued staring at the tank with an intensity that unnerved her mother. It was as if the baby understood the gravity of the situation better than most adults would. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled through Jessica's phone, professional but detached. There's a dog trapped in a storage tank in the industrial district on Mill Avenue, Jessica said breathlessly. He's been down there for days, maybe weeks. He's dying. We need animal control here immediately. The silence on the other end stretched longer than Jessica expected. When the dispatcher finally responded, her tone had shifted from urgent to bureaucratic. "Ma'am, I'll need to transfer you to Animal Control Services. Please hold." The hold music felt like a cruel joke as Jessica watched the trapped dog through the drainage opening. His breathing was shallow, labored. Each rise and fall of his chest seemed like it might be his last. The Arizona sun was climbing higher, and Jessica could already feel the concrete beneath her knees heating up like a stovetop. Inside that tank, the temperature would soon become unbearable. Animal Control Services. This is Derek speaking. The voice that finally came through sounded tired and overworked. Jessica repeated her emergency, this time with more urgency. "Please, he's dying. Down there. This is life or death." Derek's response hit her like a physical blow. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but we're currently dealing with a hoarding situation across town that's taken our entire team. We've got 47 animals in crisis over here. The earliest we can get someone to your location would be..." She heard papers shuffling. "Sometime late this afternoon, maybe early evening, late afternoon?" Jessica's voice cracked. "He'll be dead by then. The temperature is supposed to hit 115 degrees today." "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're severely understaffed due to budget cuts. If this were a human emergency, I'd suggest calling the fire department, but for animal situations..." Derek's voice trailed off with practiced indifference. Jessica ended the call and stared at her phone in disbelief. In a city of nearly 2 million people, no one could spare an hour to save a dying animal. The bureaucratic machinery that was supposed to protect the vulnerable had failed completely, leaving this magnificent creature to die alone in a concrete grave. Emma began making soft cooing sounds, not distressed like before, but almost conversational, as if she were trying to communicate with the trapped dog. Jessica knelt down beside the stroller and followed her daughter's gaze back to the drainage opening. The German Shepherd had managed to lift his head slightly and was looking up toward the light. For just a moment, his eyes met Jessica's, and she saw something that would haunt her forever. Not just pain and desperation, but intelligence and dignity, even in the face of death. "I'm not leaving you here," Jessica whispered toward the opening, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "Emma found you for a reason." Jessica's mind raced through possibilities. Call her husband Carlos? He was working a double shift at the construction site and wouldn't be available for hours. Her mother lived 40 minutes away and didn't drive anymore. Friends? Most of them would think she was crazy for getting involved in such a dangerous situation with a baby in tow. Then she remembered the neighborhood Facebook groups. Phoenix had dozens of community pages where residents shared everything from lost pet alerts to requests for babysitters. If there was any chance of mobilizing help quickly, social media was her best bet. With Emma watching her every move, Jessica opened the Phoenix Community Help page and began typing with shaking fingers. Emergency animal rescue needed Mill Avenue Industrial District. Baby discovered German Shepherd trapped 25 feet down in concrete storage tank. Animal control can't respond until evening. Dog will die in this heat. Need ropes, ladders, people who know about rescue. This is urgent. Please share. She attached a quick photo of the tank and the approximate location, then posted it simultaneously to 5 different community groups. Within seconds, her phone began buzzing with notifications. The first response came from someone named Miguel Santos. "On my way, bringing ropes and equipment. AT 10 minutes. Then another. "I'm a retired nurse. Coming with first aid supplies for both human and animal emergencies." And another. "Local news producer here. This sounds like something our viewers need to know about. Can I broadcast live from the scene?" Within 5 minutes, Jessica's post had been shared over 200 times. Comments poured in faster than she could read them. "My son has rock climbing gear. I'm bringing bottled water. Called my brother. He's a volunteer firefighter. This baby is a hero for finding him." Emma seemed to sense the shifting energy around them. Her intense focus on the tank remained unwavering, but her body language had relaxed slightly, as if she knew that help was mobilizing. She began babbling, softly in her baby language, making sounds that seemed almost like encouragement, directed toward the concrete opening. Jessica knelt down and peered into the tank again. The German Shepherd's eyes were still open, still alert despite his weakened condition. "Hold on, buddy," she called down softly. "Emma found you, and now the whole city is coming to help. Just hold on a little longer." As if responding to her voice, the dog managed a barely perceptible movement of his tail against the concrete floor. It was the first sign of hope Jessica had seen, and it brought tears to her eyes. In the distance, she could hear the rumble of approaching vehicles. Strangers were racing across Phoenix to help save a dog they'd never met, mobilized by the pure instinct of an 18-month-old child who had somehow sensed suffering that everyone else had missed. The race against time had begun, and Jessica realized that Emma had just taught her something profound about the power of compassion to unite complete strangers in a common cause. The first vehicle to screech into the dusty parking lot was a battered pickup truck with construction equipment rattling in its bed. Miguel Santos jumped out before the engine had fully stopped, his weathered hands already reaching for climbing ropes and carabiners. At 45, Miguel had spent 2 decades in high-rise construction. But he'd never imagined using his skills for an animal rescue mission, inspired by a baby's intuition. "Where is he?" Miguel called out, jogging toward Jessica with a coil of rope slung over his shoulder. His calloused hands and confident stride immediately gave Jessica hope that maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation could have a happy ending. Emma's entire demeanor changed the moment Miguel arrived. Her intense focus on the tank remained, but she began clapping her tiny hands together and making excited babbling sounds, as if she understood that the rescue team was assembling. For the first time since discovering the trapped dog, she seemed genuinely happy. "Down there," Jessica pointed to the drainage opening. "He's been trapped for days, maybe longer." Miguel knelt beside the concrete structure and peered inside, his expression growing grave as he assessed the situation. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath. "That's got to be 25 feet, maybe 30. The walls are completely smooth, no way for anything to climb out." He looked back at Jessica with newfound respect. "How the hell did your baby know he was down there?" Before Jessica could attempt an answer, a Honda Civic pulled up, and an elderly Asian woman emerged carrying what appeared to be a full medical kit. Mrs. Lily Chun had been a registered nurse for 38 years before retiring, and her instincts for emergency response remained sharp despite her 72 years. "I brought water, electrolyte solutions, and basic veterinary supplies," Mrs. Chun announced, setting her kit down with practiced efficiency. "My late husband was a veterinarian. I've assisted in animal emergencies before." She peered into the tank opening and shook her head sadly. "Poor creature is severely dehydrated. How long has he been down there?" "We don't know," Jessica replied. "Emma just discovered him 20 minutes ago." Mrs. Chun looked at the baby with obvious amazement. "This little one has quite a gift. In Chinese culture, we believe some children are born with special sensitivity to suffering. Your daughter may be one of those rare souls." A loud rumble announced the arrival of a Jeep Wrangler with oversized tires and a roof rack loaded with outdoor gear. Twins Jake and Josh Morrison, both 19 and home from Arizona State University for spring break, had abandoned their planned hiking trip the moment they saw Jessica's Facebook post. They'd spent the last 4 years volunteering with the campus search and rescue team. "We brought our drone," Jake announced, pulling a sophisticated quadcopter from his backpack. "We need to get a better view of the situation down there before anyone attempts a rescue." Josh was already assembling a portable pulley system. "This gear is rated for mountain rescue operations. If we can get someone down there safely, we can get them back up with whatever they're carrying." The drone buzzed to life and descended into the tank, its camera streaming live footage to Jake's tablet. What they saw made everyone gathered around the screen fall silent. The German Shepherd was even larger than they'd realized, probably 80 or 90 pounds, and he was lying in several inches of stagnant water that had collected at the bottom of the tank. His breathing was labored, and flies had begun to gather around him. "He's in bad shape," Josh said quietly, "but he's definitely alive. Look, his ears are moving. He can hear the drone." More vehicles were arriving by the minute. Word had spread beyond Facebook to local radio stations and Twitter feeds. A Channel 12 news van pulled up, followed by a Tesla driven by Dr. Sarah Williams, an emergency veterinarian who had canceled her morning appointments after seeing the story trending online. "I brought medical oxygen and 4 fluids," Dr. Williams announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. "But we need to get him out of there fast. That water he's lying in could be contaminated with chemicals from when this was an active industrial site." Emma seemed to understand that each new arrival brought them closer to saving her 4-legged friend. She had started pointing enthusiastically at each person who approached the tank, then back at the opening as if she were personally coordinating the rescue effort. Her babbling had taken on what Jessica could only describe as an encouraging tone. Local news reporter Diana Walsh began setting up for a live broadcast, her cameraman capturing the growing crowd of volunteers. "This is an extraordinary scene," Diana said into her microphone during a sound check. An 18-month-old baby discovered what dozens of adults had apparently walked past for days, and now complete strangers are risking their own safety, too. Save an animal they've never met. The crowd had grown to nearly 60 people, ranging from college students to retirees, construction workers to soccer moms. Someone had brought folding chairs for the elderly volunteers. Another person arrived, with a cooler full of ice water for the human rescuers. A local coffee shop owner showed up with free beverages for everyone. Miguel had been studying the tank structure and consulting with the Morrison twins about the safest descent route. "The biggest challenge is going to be getting back up," he explained to the growing crowd. "Going down is the easy part, but coming back up with an 80-pound unconscious dog," he shook his head, "that's going to require everything we've got." Mrs. Chun had positioned herself next to Emma's stroller and was amazed by the baby's behavior. "She hasn't taken her eyes off that tank for 45 minutes, she observed. "It's like she's maintaining some kind of vigil, making sure we don't give up." Dr. Williams knelt beside the drainage opening and called down softly, "Hey there, big guy. Can you hear me?" From the depths of the tank came a weak but unmistakable response, a single barely audible bark. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Emma clapped her hands with pure joy, as if she'd been waiting for that exact moment to know that her mission was succeeding. The rescue attempt was about to begin, and an entire community of strangers had become united by the pure compassion of a child who had heard a cry for help that no one else could detect. The crowd fell silent as Miguel Santos tested the anchor point he'd constructed using the twins' climbing equipment. He'd wrapped heavy-duty rope around the base of a nearby utility pole and run it through a series of pulleys, creating what he hoped would be a reliable system for lowering someone into the tank and bringing them back up with the trapped German Shepherd. "This setup should hold up to 300 pounds, Miguel announced, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd trusted similar rigging systems while working on Phoenix's tallest construction projects. "But we're talking about a 25-foot drop into an unknown situation. Whoever goes down there needs to be light enough to minimize stress on the system, but strong enough to handle a panicked 80-pound dog." Emma had been watching every preparation with laser-like focus, her small hands gripping the sides of her stroller, as if she were personally invested in each technical decision. When Miguel spoke about the dangers, she began making soft whimpering sounds again, not the urgent distress calls from earlier, but something that sounded almost like worry. "I'll go," Josh Morrison volunteered immediately, stepping forward with the confidence of youth. "I'm certified in technical rescue, and I'm only 160. That gives us the best weight ratio for the pulley system." His twin brother Jake shook his head emphatically. "You're afraid of dogs, remember? That time the neighbor's retriever jumped on you, you practically climbed a tree." "That was different," Josh protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'll do it," said a clear, determined voice from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned to see Amanda Brooks pushing through the circle of volunteers. At 19, she was a sophomore at Phoenix College studying veterinary science, and she'd arrived on her motorcycle just minutes earlier after seeing the story on Instagram. Amanda was compact and athletic, with the kind of wiry strength that came from years of rock climbing in Arizona's desert mountains. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes held the kind of steady determination that made experienced rescuers twice her age step aside. "I've been climbing since I was 12, Amanda continued, already checking the rope system with practiced hands. "I volunteer at the animal shelter, so I know how to handle stressed dogs. And I weigh 130 soaking wet, which gives us the best safety margin. Miguel studied her carefully, noting the way she tested each carabiner and examined the anchor points with professional thoroughness. "You sure about this, kid? That dog down there is probably scared out of his mind. He might bite first and ask questions later." Amanda smiled grimly. Scared animals need gentle voices and slow movements. "I've worked with aggressive dogs before." She looked directly at Emma, who had been listening to every word with remarkable attention for an 18-month-old. Besides, this little hero found him for a reason. "I'm not going to let her down." As if responding to Amanda's words, Emma suddenly reached out her tiny arms toward the young woman, making the soft cooing sounds she usually reserved for her favorite people. Jessica was startled. Emma rarely warmed up to strangers so quickly. "She likes you," Jessica observed, lifting Emma from her stroller. "Emma, this is Amanda. She's going to help your doggy friend." Emma babbled something that sounded suspiciously like encouragement, then pointed from Amanda to the tank opening and back again, as if giving her personal approval for the rescue mission. Dr. Williams had been preparing a medical kit for the descent. "Take these," she said, handing Amanda a small backpack. "Emergency glucose gel in case he's hypoglycemic, a muzzle if he gets aggressive, and this." She held up a small device. "It's a pulse oximeter adapted for animals. If his oxygen levels are too low, we'll know we need to get paramedics involved immediately." Amanda secured the backpack and began checking the climbing harness that would lower her into what everyone hoped wouldn't become a concrete tomb for both her and the dog. The rope system looked solid, but there were so many variables that could go wrong. The dog might be too weak to cooperate. He might panic and injure both of them. The rope could fail. The tank walls might be slippery with algae or chemical residue. "Wait," called out Mrs. Chun, hurrying forward with something wrapped in a soft towel. "Take this." She unwrapped a small piece of cooked chicken from her lunch. Animals respond to food, even when they're afraid. "It might help him trust you." Local news reporter Diana Walsh had positioned her cameraman to capture the descent. "Amanda, can you tell our viewers why you're risking your life for a dog you've never met?" Amanda paused in her equipment check and looked directly into the camera. "Because that baby over there," she pointed to Emma, who was still watching every move from her mother's arms. She knew he was suffering when nobody else did. If a child who can't even talk yet can show that kind of compassion, then those of us who can help have a responsibility to act. The crowd murmured approval, and Emma clapped her hands as if she understood every word. Miguel made final adjustments to the belay system. "Okay, Amanda, you'll have constant communication through this radio. If anything goes wrong, and I mean anything, you call it off immediately. We'll figure out another way." "I'll be fine," Amanda replied, though her voice carried just a hint of nervousness now that the moment had arrived. She clipped into the rope system and approached the edge of the tank opening. From 25 feet below, they could hear the German Shepherd stirring, probably sensing the activity above. A weak whine drifted up through the concrete cylinder, and Emma responded with her own soft sounds, as if she were trying to communicate reassurance across the species barrier. "Here we go," Amanda said, beginning her descent into darkness. "Hold on down there, big guy. Help is finally coming." As Amanda disappeared into the tank, the crowd above held its collective breath, united in hope and fear for both the young woman who had volunteered for this dangerous mission and the dying animal who had been discovered by the most unlikely hero of all, an 18-month-old baby with an extraordinary gift for hearing cries that others couldn't detect. Amanda's voice crackled through the radio as she reached the bottom of the tank, her words echoing strangely in the concrete chamber. "I'm down. Oh God, he's in worse shape than we thought." The crowd above strained to hear every word, their faces tense with anticipation and dread. His name tag says Rex, Amanda continued, her voice softer now as she approached the massive German shepherd. Hey there, Rex. I'm here to help you, buddy. Through the radio, they could hear her gentle cooing, the same kind of soothing sounds that Emma had been making all morning. Mrs. Chun had positioned herself next to Jessica and Emma, watching the baby's reactions carefully. Emma had become remarkably still, her dark eyes fixed on the tank opening with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. It was as if she were somehow monitoring the rescue through senses that adults couldn't comprehend. He's severely dehydrated, Amanda's voice reported, but he's conscious and aware. His breathing is shallow but steady. I'm going to try to get some water into him before we attempt the lift. The sound of her water bottle opening echoed up from the depths. Miguel was monitoring the rope system constantly, checking and rechecking the anchor points. Something about the setup was making him nervous, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The weight distribution seemed correct, the pulleys were functioning smoothly, and the anchor point around the utility pole appeared solid. Okay, he's drinking. Amanda's voice carried a note of relief. Not much, but it's something. Rex, you're such a good boy. We're going to get you out of here. The gentleness in her voice made several people in the crowd wipe away tears. Dr. Williams had been timing the rescue carefully. Amanda, we need to move fast. The temperature down there is rising quickly, and prolonged exposure could be dangerous for both of you. Copy that, Amanda replied. I'm getting the harness around him now. He's being incredibly cooperative, considering what he's been through. There was a pause, then Amanda's voice came back with amazement. Dr. Williams, you need to hear this. He's not just cooperating. It's like he knows we're trying to save him. He's actually helping me position the harness. Emma suddenly became agitated, making urgent sounds and pointing frantically at the tank. Jessica tried to calm her, but the baby's distress was unlike anything she'd displayed all morning. It was as if Emma sensed something that the adults couldn't. Detect, Miguel, came Amanda's voice, now carrying a note of concern. Something doesn't feel right about this harness system. Rex weighs more than we estimated, probably closer to 90 pounds. And he's dead weight right now, even though he's conscious. Miguel's stomach clenched. He'd calculated the system for 80 pounds maximum, not 90, and certainly not for dead weight. Amanda, maybe we should reassess. His words were cut off by a sound that would haunt everyone present for years to come. A sharp crack from above, followed by Amanda's terrified scream, echoing up from the concrete chamber. The anchor point had failed. The rope system that Miguel had trusted with his life countless times on construction sites had given way under the combined stress of Amanda's weight and Rex's mass. The utility pole hadn't broken, but the concrete around its base had cracked. Under the unprecedented lateral force, causing the entire anchor system to shift dangerously. Amanda, Miguel shouted into the radio. Amanda, are you okay? Static filled the air for what felt like an eternity before Amanda's voice came back, weak but determined. I'm alive. Rex broke my fall, probably saved my life, but Miguel ... Her voice cracked with emotion. The rope is tangled around us, and Rex isn't moving. I think the fall injured him worse. The crowd above erupted in panic. Dr. Williams immediately began calling for professional emergency services, while Josh Morrison started frantically calculating alternative rescue scenarios. But everyone knew the horrible truth. They now had 2 lives trapped at the bottom of a 25-foot concrete cylinder, and their primary rescue system had catastrophically failed. Emma's reaction was the most heartbreaking of all. The baby who had maintained such remarkable composure throughout the entire ordeal suddenly burst into tears that seemed to pierce everyone's soul. These weren't the frustrated cries of a typical toddler, but something deeper, a sound of grief and anguish that suggested she understood the magnitude of what had just happened. "Oh, sweetheart," Jessica whispered, holding Emma tightly as her daughter's tears soaked through her shirt. "I know, baby. I know you're scared for them." Mrs. Chun, who had been observing Emma throughout the rescue attempt, made a startling observation. "Look at her crying," she said urgently to Jessica. "She's not crying for herself. She's crying for them. This child is experiencing genuine empathy for beings she's never even touched. This is extraordinary." Miguel was already working on backup plans, his construction experience kicking into overdrive despite his guilt over the failed system. "We need the fire department with hydraulic equipment," he called out to anyone with a phone. "This is beyond volunteer rescue now. We need professionals with industrial lifting gear." Amanda's voice came through the radio again, weaker now, but still determined. "Rex is breathing, but barely. We don't have much time. The water gown here is getting deeper, and it smells like chemicals. Whatever this tank used to store, there's still residue." Diana Walsh, the news reporter, had been broadcasting live throughout the disaster. "This rescue attempt has taken a tragic turn," she announced to her television audience. A 19-year-old college student who volunteered to save a dog discovered by a baby is now trapped herself, along with the animal she was trying to rescue. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Emma's extraordinary gift for detecting suffering had led to the rescue of one trapped soul, but now 2 lives hung in the balance in the concrete chamber that had become a death trap. As sirens wailed in the distance, announcing the arrival of professional emergency services, Emma continued to cry with a heartbreak that seemed impossible for someone so young to feel. Her tears fell like rain as the entire community realized that their volunteer rescue mission had transformed into a desperate race to prevent multiple tragedies. The baby who had started it all continued to point at the tank, her cries echoing across the desert as if calling out to Rex and Amanda in the darkness below. The piercing wail of fire truck sirens cut through the desert air like a beacon of hope as 3 massive Phoenix Fire Department vehicles converged on the industrial site. Captain Robert "Bobby" Rodriguez, no relation to Jessica's family despite sharing the surname, stepped out of the lead truck with the measured confidence of a man who had spent 23 years turning impossible situations into success stories. At 51, Captain Rodriguez had seen everything the desert city could throw at emergency responders. High-rise fires, flash flood rescues, collapsed buildings, and countless animal emergencies. But as he surveyed the scene before him, nearly 100 concerned citizens surrounding a concrete tank, a distraught baby whose cries had grown hoarse, and news cameras broadcasting live, he knew this would be unlike anything in his extensive career. "What's the situation?" He called out to Miguel, who had clearly established himself as the volunteer rescue coordinator. Miguel's voice was heavy with guilt and urgency. 19-year-old college student named Amanda Brooks is trapped 25 feet down with an INJURED German Shepherd. Our anchor system failed during the lift attempt. She's been down there for 43 minutes now, and the dog is in critical condition. Emma's crying had evolved into something that could only be described as a sustained lament. She would point at the tank, then look directly at Captain Rodriguez, then back at the tank, as if personally appealing to him for help. Jessica had never seen her daughter display such emotional intensity, and it was breaking her heart. This baby discovered the trapped dog in the first place, Dr. Williams explained to the captain, gesturing toward Emma. She somehow sensed his presence when everyone else walked right past. Now it's like she knows both lives are in danger. Captain Rodriguez knelt down to Emma's eye level, speaking in the gentle tone he reserved for scared children at accident. "Scenes. Hey there, little one. I know you're worried about your friends down there. My team is going to bring them both up safe and sound, okay? Emma's crying subsided slightly, and she looked directly into the captain's weathered face with those dark, intelligent eyes. For a moment that felt almost magical, she reached out her tiny hand and touched his cheek, then pointed once more at the tank opening. It was as if she were personally entrusting him with the rescue mission. "Jesus," Captain Rodriguez murmured, genuinely moved by the interaction. "In 23 years, I've never had a baby hand me a rescue assignment like that." His team was already setting up the hydraulic lifting equipment, industrial grade, machinery designed for extracting victims from collapsed buildings and deep excavations. Unlike the volunteer rope system, this equipment could lift several thousand pounds with precise control and multiple safety redundancies. "Amanda," Captain Rodriguez called down through a megaphone. "This is Phoenix Fire Captain Rodriguez. How are you holding up down there?" Amanda's voice drifted up, weaker than before, but still determined. "Captain, I'm okay, but Rex is fading fast. The fall injured his back legs, and the water level down here is rising. It's up to my ankles now, and it burns my skin. Whatever this tank used to store, it's not safe for prolonged contact." Dr. Williams immediately understood the implications. "Chemical burns," she said urgently to Captain Rodriguez. "If that water is caustic, we're looking at serious tissue damage for both of them. Time is absolutely critical now." The hydraulic lifting system required careful positioning and anchoring, but Captain Rodriguez's team had performed similar operations dozens of times. Within 15 minutes, they had established a stable platform and lowered a rescue basket equipped with medical supplies and protective equipment. "Amanda, we're sending down a basket with chemical-resistant boots and gloves," Captain Rodriguez announced. "Put them on immediately and get Rex into the basket. We'll lift him first, then come back for you." Emma had stopped crying entirely now, watching the professional rescue operation with the same intense focus she'd maintained all morning. Mrs. Chun, who had been observing the baby throughout the ordeal, made another startling observation too. "Jessica, look at her face," Mrs. Chun whispered. "She's not afraid anymore. It's like she knows they're going to be saved now. This child has some kind of extraordinary intuition about these things." The crowd held its collective breath as the hydraulic system began lifting the rescue basket. Through the radio, they could hear Amanda's gentle voice. "You're doing great, Rex. Just hold on a little longer, buddy. We're almost out of here." When Rex finally emerged from the tank, secured in the rescue basket, the crowd erupted in cheers that could probably be heard for miles. The German shepherd was unconscious, but breathing, his golden coat matted with chemical residue and dirt. Dr. Williams immediately began emergency treatment while Amanda was extracted in a second lift. But the most remarkable moment came when Rex was placed on Dr. Williams' portable examination table. Emma, still in her mother's arms, began making soft cooing sounds, the same gentle, encouraging sounds she'd been making all morning. As if responding to her voice, Rex's eyes fluttered open for the first time since being rescued. His gaze found Emma immediately, across 20 feet of crowded space, and his tail managed a single, weak wag against the examination table. It was a moment of recognition that transcended species, a connection between the baby who had discovered him and the dog whose life she had saved. "I'll be damned," Captain Rodriguez said quietly, wiping tears from his eyes that he didn't care if anyone saw. "That dog knows exactly who found him." Amanda, now safely on the surface and receiving medical attention for minor chemical burns, looked around at the massive crowd that had assembled to help. "I can't believe all these people came to help save a dog they'd never met," she said, her voice full of wonder. Diana Walsh, still broadcasting live, captured the moment perfectly in her report. "What we've witnessed here today is nothing short of miraculous. An 18-month-old baby's compassion mobilized an entire community. Professional emergency services successfully rescued 2 lives from a concrete death trap. And we've all been reminded that heroism comes in many forms, including the pure, innocent heart of a child who heard a cry for help that everyone else missed. Emma clapped her tiny hands together, looking back and forth between Rex and Amanda with what could only be described as satisfaction. Her mission was complete. The suffering she had detected with her remarkable intuition had been transformed into healing, and an entire city had learned something profound about the power of compassion to unite strangers in a common cause. Miracle on Mill Avenue was complete, but the story of Emma and Rex was just beginning. 3 days after the dramatic rescue, Jessica sat in the sterile waiting room of Desert Springs Veterinary Emergency Hospital, Emma sleeping peacefully in her lap. The baby had refused to leave Rex's side since the rescue, somehow sensing that her 4-legged friend still needed her presence. The veterinary staff had been amazed by Emma's calming effect on the recovering German Shepherd and had made special accommodations for their daily visits. Dr. Williams emerged from the examination room with a mixture of relief and sadness on her face. Rex was going to survive. His physical injuries were healing remarkably well, and the chemical burns had responded better to treatment than anyone had expected. But the microchip scan had revealed information that would break everyone's heart. "We found his owner," Dr. Williams said quietly, settling into the chair across from Jessica. "Or rather, we found out what happened to his owner." Emma stirred in her mother's lap, her dark eyes opening with that same alertness that had become so familiar to everyone who had witnessed the rescue. Even half asleep, she seemed to sense the gravity of the conversation. Rex belonged to a man named Frank Morrison. He was a 73-year-old Army veteran who lived alone in a small house about 2 miles from where you found Rex. Frank died of a massive heart attack in his kitchen 3.5 weeks ago. Dr. Williams paused, her voice thick with emotion. A neighbor found his body 5 days later when mail started piling up. By then, Rex had disappeared. Jessica felt tears welling up in her eyes as the full tragedy became clear. He's been on his own all this time? The neighbor said Rex was devoted to Frank, followed him everywhere, slept beside his bed every night. When the paramedics and police came to remove Frank's body, Rex must have panicked and run away. Dr. Williams pulled out a folder containing Frank's veterinary records. According to these files, Rex is 8 years old. Frank adopted him from the shelter as a puppy after his wife died. They were each other's entire world. Emma had been listening with that uncanny attention she displayed throughout the entire ordeal. Now she began making soft whimpering sounds. Not distress exactly, but something that sounded remarkably like sympathy. It was as if she understood that Rex had lost the most important person in his life. "There's more," Dr. Williams continued. "I spoke with Frank's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She said Frank had been talking for months about what would happen to Rex if something happened to him. Frank had no living family, no close friends. He was terrified that Rex would end up back in the shelter system, and at 8 years old." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew that older dogs had little chance of adoption. Jessica looked down at Emma, who had begun reaching toward the examination room door where Rex was recovering. What happens to him now? Legally, he becomes the responsibility of animal control, given his age and the overcrowding in the system. Dr. Williams trailed off, but the implication was clear. Rex had survived chemical burns, dehydration, and near death, only to face the possibility of being euthanized for lack of space in the shelter system. The injustice of it hit Jessica like a physical blow. Emma had performed a miracle, mobilizing an entire city to save Rex's life, and now he faced the very fate that his beloved owner had spent months worrying about. It seemed like a cosmic betrayal of everything that had happened over the past 3 days. "There has to be something we can do," Jessica said, her voice rising with determination. After everything he's been through? After what Emma went through to save him? Emma seemed to respond to her mother's emotional intensity, making urgent, babbling sounds and pointing repeatedly at the examination room door. Her message was clear. She wanted to see Rex, wanted to make sure he was okay, wanted to continue the bond that had somehow formed between them across species lines and concrete walls. Dr. Williams opened the door, and Emma practically leaped from her mother's arms in her eagerness to reach the recovering German Shepherd. Rex was lying on a padded examination table, 4 lines running into his front leg, but his tail began wagging the moment he saw Emma approach. The connection between them was unmistakable and profound. Emma reached out her tiny hand to gently touch Rex's massive paw, and he responded by lifting his head and nuzzling her palm with his nose. It was a gesture of recognition, gratitude, and what could only be described as love. "Look at that," Dr. Williams whispered, her professional demeanor cracking as emotion took over. "In 30 years of veterinary medicine, I've never seen anything like the bond between these two. It's like they understand each other in ways that don't make scientific sense." Jessica watched her daughter and Rex interact, seeing something that took her breath away. Emma wasn't just visiting a dog she'd helped rescue. She was communing with a kindred spirit who had experienced loss, fear, and salvation. Despite the vast differences in their ages and species, they shared an understanding that transcended normal communication. "Dr. Williams," Jessica said suddenly, her voice filled with a certainty that surprised even her. "What would it take to adopt Rex ourselves?" The veterinarian's eyes widened. "Jessica, he's a large, older dog who's been through severe trauma. The commitment would be enormous. The medical costs alone." "Emma found him for a reason," Jessica interrupted, watching her daughter continue to comfort the dog with gentle touches and soft cooing sounds. "Look at them together. How can I break up something this special?" Emma seemed to sense the conversation about her and Rex. She looked back at her mother with those dark, intelligent eyes, then at Dr. Williams, then back at Rex. Her tiny hand remained on his paw, as if she were making a promise that she would never abandon him the way the rest of the world had. There would be paperwork, background checks, and significant medical expenses, Dr. Williams warned. Rex will need months of rehabilitation, and there could be lasting effects from his ordeal. Jessica looked at her daughter, who is now humming softly to Rex in that way she hummed when she was completely content. The dog's breathing had visibly relaxed under Emma's touch, and his tail continued to wag despite his exhaustion. "He already has a family," Jessica said with quiet conviction. "He just doesn't know it yet." 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, Jessica stood in her backyard, watching the most beautiful sight she could have ever imagined. Emma, now 2 years old and walking with confident, determined steps, was leading Rex around their newly fenced yard like she was giving him a personal tour of his kingdom. The massive German Shepherd, fully recovered and gleaming with health, stayed perfectly in step with his tiny guide, his protective instincts finely tuned to her every movement. "Rex, look!" Emma called out in her expanding vocabulary, pointing to a butterfly that had landed on their new rose bush. "Pretty." Rex dutifully looked where she pointed, his tail wagging at her excitement, though Jessica suspected he was more interested in watching Emma than any butterfly. The transformation in both of them had been remarkable. Rex had gained back all the weight he'd lost during his ordeal, his coat now shining with the kind of health that comes from premium food and unlimited love. But more importantly, the haunted look that had lingered in his eyes for weeks after the rescue had been replaced by something Jessica could only describe as joy. He had found his purpose again, not as Frank Morrison's companion, but as Emma Rodriguez's devoted guardian. Emma had changed too. The sensitive, quiet baby who had detected Rex's suffering had blossomed into a confident toddler who seemed to have an almost supernatural connection with animals. Their veterinarian, Dr. Williams, had commented during their last visit that she'd never seen a child and dog bond so completely. "It's like they share the same soul," she had marveled. The doorbell interrupted Jessica's peaceful morning observation. Through the front window, she could see a familiar news van parked in their driveway. Diana Walsh, the reporter who had covered their story 6 months ago, had returned as promised to film a follow-up segment on Emma and Rex's remarkable journey. "Jessica," Diana called out warmly as she entered the backyard with her cameraman. "Look at this. Rex looks absolutely magnificent." Rex immediately positioned himself between the strangers and Emma, not aggressively, but with the alert posture of a dog who took his protective duties seriously. Emma, however, had no such reservations. She toddled over to Diana with the confident smile of a child who had learned that most adults found her story fascinating. "This is Rex," Emma announced proudly, her 2-year-old pronunciation making his name sound like Wex. "He's my best friend." Diana knelt down to Emma's level, genuinely moved by the sight of the baby who had started it all. "Emma, do you remember finding Rex in that big tank?" Emma nodded solemnly, then walked over to Rex and wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. Rex was sad. Now Rex is happy. Her simple summary of their 6-month journey brought tears to Diana's eyes. "Can you tell our viewers what life has been like with Rex?" Diana asked Jessica, as the cameraman captured Emma and Rex playing together. Jessica watched her daughter attempt to teach Rex how to play patty cake, a game the patient German shepherd endured with remarkable grace. "It's been incredible," she said. "Rex isn't just Emma's pet. He's her partner. They communicate in ways I don't fully understand. Sometimes I think Rex knows what Emma needs before she does." As if to demonstrate this point, Emma suddenly sat down hard on the grass, a precursor to one of her occasional toddler meltdowns. Before Jessica could even move, Rex was there, gently nuzzling Emma's cheek and settling down beside her. Emma immediately wrapped her arms around him, her potential tantrum dissolving into giggles. "That happens at least once a day," Jessica explained. "It's like he can sense her emotional state and knows exactly how to help her regulate it." Diana was capturing every moment on camera, knowing that viewers across the country had been following Emma and Rex's story since the dramatic rescue. "We've received thousands of letters asking about them," she told Jessica. "People all over the world have been inspired by Emma's story. There's something about a baby's pure compassion that touches everyone." The backyard had become a gathering place for their new extended family, the community of rescuers who had become lifelong friends. Miguel Santos stopped by weekly to check on his dog, as he had come to call Rex, always bringing new toys or treats. Amanda Brooks, now in her junior year studying veterinary medicine, credited her experience rescuing Rex with confirming her career choice. Mrs. Chun had become Emma's honorary grandmother, teaching her basic Mandarin words and bringing homemade treats for both Emma and Rex. "The most amazing part," Jessica continued, "is watching Emma with other animals now. It's like that experience with Rex awakened something in her. Last month at the zoo, she kept pointing at a sick elephant before any of the zookeepers noticed anything was wrong. The veterinarian later confirmed the elephant had an early infection that would have been serious if not caught early. Emma had moved on to a new game, hide and seek with Rex in their small garden. She would hide behind the garden shed, barely containing her giggles, while Rex pretended to search for her with exaggerated confusion before finding her with great surprise and celebration. Their joy was infectious, and everyone watching couldn't help but smile. "What do you think the future holds for Emma?" Diana asked, watching the pair play. Jessica considered the question carefully. I think Emma has a gift that goes beyond normal intuition. Whether she becomes a veterinarian, works in animal rescue, or finds some other way to help, I know she'll spend her life making the world better for creatures who can't speak for themselves. As if summoned by their conversation, Emma ran over and climbed into Jessica's lap, with Rex immediately positioning himself at their feet. "Mommy," Emma said with the serious expression she wore when making important announcements. "Rex says thank you." Jessica looked down at her daughter, and at Rex, who was gazing up at them both with those intelligent amber eyes. "Rex says thank you?" Emma nodded gravely. "He says thank you for finding him, and for loving him, and for giving him a family again." Diana wiped away tears as her cameraman captured this final, perfect moment. Later, when the segment aired nationally, it would become one of the most watched feel-good stories of the year. But for Jessica, Emma, and Rex, it was simply another ordinary, extraordinary day in their life together. The baby who had heard a cry for help that no one else could detect had grown into a toddler whose compassion continued to change lives. Rex, the abandoned dog who had nearly died alone, had found not just a home but a purpose. And their bond had proven that love truly has no boundaries. Not between species, not across age gaps, not even through concrete walls. Their story had become a testament to the power of innocence, compassion, and the miraculous things that happen when pure hearts refuse to ignore suffering, no matter how hidden it might be.